Tell us a little bit about early childhood and where you're from.
I actually grew up in Utah, Salt Lake City, super Orthodox religious family. Had 4 younger sisters. And we weren't rich. I don't think we had any furniture in our living room when I graduated from high school type thing. But I had big goals, big dreams of wanting to make an impact. But a couple things really impacted me. One of which, in high school, I became the president of something called the peer leadership team that helped kids with alcohol and drug abuse and home, domestic abuse situations, et cetera. And I realized in that position, and the reason why it was really effective was if kids are having some big problems at home, like they're being abused by a parent or whatnot, if they go talk to a teacher, that teacher legally has to go talk to an authority. So a lot of times the kids wouldn't talk to a teacher. But if they had a peer counselor, now they could open up. And in that experience, and talking to these kids and realizing how many of them were dealing with some serious issues with parents who had drug and alcohol abuse, the kids themselves that were dealing with that, and then how many of them had dealt with serious childhood trauma in their home, sexual trauma. In fact, the numbers are staggering. Literally, 1 in every 4 women that you know has admitted that she was abused as a child sexually. Now, that's a big number. And that's just the ones who talk about it. The average age is like 52 years old. That's my age. You grow through your whole life carrying all this stuff. With men, it's a little bit less. It's 1 in 5 at some time in our life. Mm-hmm. But even them, 1 in 4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old in their own home. So I realized there's so many people that are holding on to a lot of trauma from their childhood. And that physical, verbal, or sexual abuse as a child comes out in anger issues, depression, anxiety, addictions, all kinds of challenges that we deal with as adults come from unresolved traumas as children.
This show is sponsored by Open Recovery Addiction Help. Whether you're newly sober, in long-term sobriety, or even maybe looking to make a change in your life, Open Recovery offers 24/7 support right from your phone. It's anonymous and packed with tools to help you stay connected, stay accountable, and build the life you deserve. Download the Open Recovery Addiction Help app today and take the next step in your recovery journey. So you got into this, helping people at a young age, and your eyes were open to the raw side of the world and what's going on in the US. What did that do to you?
Well, I was blessed to be in a home where it wasn't happening. So I thought, until later we're like, oh, wow, there are some extended family members who are dealing with this, et cetera. And, but it imprinted, I remember coming home as a little kid once. I was getting picked on real bad. And I said, Mom, I know what I want to do when I grow up. She's like, oh, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a brain surgeon. She's like, oh, wow, that's great. Why do you want to be a brain surgeon? I said, well, I want to fix how people think, right? And then it progressed. I actually did want to be a surgeon. I changed it to being a heart surgeon instead. And I think that innately I realized that the only way to fix your brain is to fix your heart, really. Mm-hmm. That's where most of those problems come from, that is a void somewhere, something that needs to be fixed here. And so I really did. I did all my pre-med classes in high school. I was 2 months away from taking the MCAT. And I didn't want to just be a heart surgeon. I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist, one who operates on children. And 2 months before taking the MCAT, I got in a major car accident. I severed all the tendons in my hand. I still have this big scar that goes right up here. It took him a couple of years to get I still have I-80 right here. Oh, wow. But they told me they didn't think I'd have the dexterity to be a surgeon. And they said, well, you can be a regular doctor. And I said, well, I don't want to be a regular anything. You know, if I'm going to be a garbage man, I'm going to own the dump. That's just how I think. You know, I got one shot at this life. You know, I'm going to do something with it. And so I changed my major to finance and business, and
it's complete opposite.
It's complete opposite because I want to be a regular doctor, but I can use my brain and do finance stuff instead. I don't have to use my hand to be a surgeon, and started going through school there, but then started a company.
Yeah.
And my company helped people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addictions and childhood trauma. And that company started making enough money fairly early that I dropped out of school. I'm like,
this was in college?
It was in college, yeah.
So you were probably, 20 years old?
21 years old.
21, you start this company and you're making really good money enough to just say, you know what, F this, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I realized, you know what, I don't need a piece of paper on my wall that says I can work for myself, you know? And so I ended up building a really successful anxiety depression company, sold it at 29 years old for a lot of money, started investing in real estate.
Wait, really quick, the depression and anxiety company, what was it? Was it like you were selling a program?
Yeah. I actually worked with there was a lady by the name of Lucinda Bassett. This was 35 years ago. And she had dealt with anxiety and depression herself. She had a program. She had a company called Midwest Center for Stress and Anxiety. Well, I owned Midwest Center Marketing. And so we did all of the marketing. We created helped create some of the infomercial stuff. We created a lot of the inbound call center. We had a coaching program and built that up to a few hundred employees. What we had was what they call a cognitive restructuring program. So the drug companies are making like $40 billion a year selling Xanax and Prozac and all these addictive drugs. And, people think, well, it's okay because my doctor prescribed it to me. Guess what? If you can't go a week without it, then you're addicted, right? You need to find where the roots of the problem are. Even anxiety, depression medications, the pharmaceutical companies are making big money keeping us sick, right? Keeping us addicted to things that aren't fixing the root of the problem. And that's really where my understanding, starting in my high school years and realizing the root was a lot of childhood trauma, unresolved, et cetera. Moving forward, I realized that most of these people, and understand that 1 out of every 4 people in the country have an anxiety disorder to the point where it's somewhat debilitating. It affects their ability to have a healthy relationship with other people, with their boss, with their family, et cetera. Or and at some time in their life, about 1/4 of all Americans will get to the point where they literally can't even leave their house, or they can't function a normal job because of their either addictions or anxiety or depression. These are all major things that are affecting Americans every day. And the problem is that these drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, aren't fixing anything. The doctor just, the prescription is made so that you can continue to go back over and over and over again, and they're just numbing. They're numbing the emotions. Nothing is getting down to the roots of the problem. And so what we were doing is trying to get down to the roots, the negative habit patterns of thought, the worry, the what if thinking, the negative expectations, the perceptions we have of ourselves, our coping skills in dealing with stress. These are all things to deal with stress and anxiety. And then when it came to addictions, getting deeper into to where those voids were and how people need to overcome those in order to break free of those addictions. Because if you're addicted to alcohol, it's not the alcohol's, it's not the addiction that you got to fight. You've got to figure out where everything's coming from. And so we had a workbook, we had a audio program, we had videos that would help people learn the tools to break free and live a normal life. And what was interesting, I sold the company to a fund. They kind of ran it into the ground because we had these cheap ass stuff. We had like videos of regular dudes, right? Regular people who talk about, hey, this is where I was. This is what I did. I used this program. And it gave people the one missing ingredient, which was belief. This is why we do AA programs and stuff, because you got to have somebody else that's been through it, that the very thing that we're fighting sometimes stops us from overcoming it. Hope. Exactly. And so these guys re-recorded all of our stuff with a bunch of celebrities and doctors and stuff, teaching stuff, you know what? If you're dealing with that shit, you don't want to hear a doctor. He doesn't know me. He's never been there.
He can't relate to me. The everyday average Joe can relate to me. And that's funny you say that, because when I do my podcast, I've had a couple like B-list celebrities on my podcast. They don't do well.
Yeah.
Their stories are amazing. People can't relate.
Yeah.
When I have an average Joe on, it does really well.
Yeah.
People can relate.
Yeah.
Sorry for cutting you off.
No, you're exactly right. And that's why we were so effective, is that we filled the audio programs, the videos were all average Joes. In fact, our coaching program had a 97% success rate. And our coaches were not therapists. Our coaches were people who had been through our program, who had overcome it. And then we have them work with them every single week, a minimum of once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, just on the phone, just keeping them accountable and giving them that hope, saying, listen, I know exactly how you feel. I felt the same way. This is what I found. This is what worked for me. And that hope, and that together with the tools to step forward, that's what makes the biggest difference. So sold that company, started real estate, built a really successful real estate fund. And I can talk about the reasons I believe it was successful. I mean, I'm a University of Utah dropout, right? The statistical probability of me being where I am with the executive director of Sound of Freedom, with the successful company, it's zero. Guys like me don't get to where I am. And the only way I can understand it is that I made some decisions in my early 20s when it came to charity work and giving back that I believe made all the difference in the success of those companies.
Why do you say that? Just good karma?
No, I do. You can call it God, you can call it karma, you can call it the universal law of success. You can call it whatever you want to. There's a higher power very interested in us doing good, right? And I had a mentor in my early 20s, and he said, Paul, the average person donates 2% of their annual income to charity, to making a difference in the lives of others. He said, if you make a decision that number isn't 2%, that number is 10%, 15, even 20% of your income, he said, your ability to create success in your life will be so much easier. And I said, well, that's why I want to be successful, is I want to be able to, be charitable when I'm successful. He goes, no, don't wait till you're successful. Do it now. I'm earning like $2,000 a month, right? And I'm like, shit, I can barely make it work. He says, do it now. I'm like, I have to live on $1,600 a month, if I'm giving 20% away. Well, I believe that making that decision back when I was broke made all the difference. And again, you can call it karma, you can call it universal law of exchange, call it whatever you want to. When you're upwards of 10, 15, even 20% of what's coming in, you prove to the universe, prove to God that you're going to be a good steward, that you already are. Not I'm going to be, but you already are a good steward of what's coming in. And I saw massive success in my companies that wasn't, I work really hard. I work really hard at any company I'm doing, and I had decent results. But if I worked really hard and tried to have a powerful, positive impact in the lives of others, then my business stuff just accelerated.
Elevated.
And very, very seldom was any of that elevation from anything that I did. It was literally gifts from God, right? I remember when we were doing some of the charity work, and there was a guy by the name of Glenn Beck. He's a radio talk show host. He's got like 50 million followers between everything, super conservative guy. He wanted to launch his anti-child trafficking campaign from Bangkok, Thailand. And it was going to cost $100,000 to get him and his team there. It was a lot of money. And the charity I was working with at the time, we had a lot of grandmas that were donating $20 a month. And, that's kind of sacred money. I don't want to spend $100,000 on that, on just getting a personality to Thailand. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and cover that. I'll pay for that, myself and my business partner, Dawn. So we flew to Thailand, videoed all of the kids and stuff there. And all of his audience is, wow, and getting behind this movement. When we fly back to the US, as the wheels touch down and I get cell phone signal on my phone, I had 2 voicemail messages pop up on my phone. One of them was from one of the members of the Marriott family saying, hey, Paul, I've been looking at the numbers. I want to put another $10 million in your senior housing fund. And the other one was from one of the owners of Flying J Management, one that said, hey, I want even a bigger number. And my income from those two voicemail messages was multiples of the $100,000 that I just put in, right? So I truly believe that I call it a multiplier, right? We only have 24 hours in our day to create and build and whatever else. And you don't want to do charity, give charity work for the expectation to get money. But the reality is, if anybody who's even, I don't care if you're a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian, in the Torah, in the Old Testament, the book of Malachi says, prove me now herewith if I will not open you the windows of heaven, that there will not be room enough to receive it. And it's talking about the tithe. It's talking about charity. It's literally the only place in any scriptures that specifically says you do charity work, you give financially, you will literally, the windows of heaven are open. So that's what happened. And I believe that was the key. And that's how I started getting into the anti-child trafficking work, et cetera, is because of that decision in my early 20s to give a big portion of anything that was coming in.
Can you talk about some of the reality that goes on in this world around child trafficking?
It's pretty dark.
Yeah, let's hear it.
This is pretty dark. So I about 11 years ago, I was successful real estate investor, got a phone call from our attorney general in our area. And he said, Paul, I know you've donated a lot to child-related charities. I need to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. He said, it's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and good people don't know that it's happening. He started talking about human trafficking, and he said, there's some operators I want to introduce you to and that are working on this. And so he introduced me to some of these guys, and they told me how there was some children in Colombia. And I had never been to Colombia. I heard there was, some shit going on in South America, but he said, there's some children down there that are literally being sold for sex. And I'm like, what the hell? How does somebody get to a place like that? And we can talk about the road of addiction when it comes to sex addiction and pornography addiction and unhealed childhood trauma, et cetera, that can lead to the demand for this. And that's really where I started focusing on how do I fix this problem, right? But first of all, me seeing the darkness myself. So I helped to finance it. And then a couple of weeks later, he says it's going to cost like $50,000 to rescue these 20 kids. And I say, I helped make that happen. Well, a few weeks later, he called me and he said, Paul, I'm here in Cartagena. There's not just 20 kids here. There's more than 50 that we've identified. There's more than 100 children in the surrounding areas in different rings. He said, I think we can rescue all these kids at the same time, but I need your help. And ego me is like, well, how much do you need? He said, I need you. Can you be in Colombia in 2 days? He said, I have to have somebody who can effectively negotiate a multi-million-dollar real estate deal with the cartel, with the traffickers. He said the head trafficker has a piece of property he wants to develop into a child brothel, sex resort, that he believes he can make tens of millions of dollars a year because of the insatiable demand of Americans that were going down there. He was going to charge $100,000 for a membership fee to this resort, right? It was beyond my comprehension. I'm like, okay, I don't understand where this who would be interested in that, but if I can help, I'll help, right? And so 2 days later, I'm in Colombia. Now, he knew more about my background than most people. I have, some skills that make me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. But mostly he needed somebody who could wear a nice suit and a nice watch and negotiate a real estate deal, right? And I'm sitting with these guys. Now, here's what's interesting. I thought, okay, I'm going to meet child traffickers. These guys are going to have earrings in their noses and tattoos down their necks. The first trafficker I met was a businessman, clean cut, clean shaven, nice polo shirt, well-spoken. The next I met was a beautiful woman. She was a model. She actually was in the contestant for Miss Cartagena. If your audience has seen the Sound of Freedom movie, she's the Giselle that, was putting together the entire operation, et cetera. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, these guys aren't what I would expect. And they started talking about what they were doing and who their customers were and all this stuff. And I thought, this is dark. And I realized over the next 10 years, this was 11 years ago, 12 years ago, over the next 10 years in leading over 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries, the common thread with the traffickers wasn't earrings in their noses and tattoos on their necks. The common thread was arrogance, greed, lust, unhealed childhood trauma, addictions. Almost always were feeding it. Addictions to drug, addictions to alcohol, addictions to pornography, addictions to sex. These are addictions because, they could make money off of these things just to be able, because sometimes, when you're super addicted to something and you need the money to fill it, you'll freaking do anything, right? You'll, whatever it takes. And some of these guys, that anything is going into prostitution, either for themselves or prostituting others. And then they cross the line. And pretty soon they're selling kids. And so I'm sitting there at this table and halfway through the meeting, one of them leans forward. He goes, Pablo, he said, I have a gift for you. I said, really, what's your gift? He gives me his phone and there's a picture of an 11-year-old girl on his phone. And I'm like, what the fuck? He says, this is Princess. She's still a virgin. We just took delivery of some. She's my gift for you, for this party. He started talking about horrific things I could do to this child. And I thought, oh my God, if we could get these children out before they were ever hurt the first time. Now, I had 4 little sisters and I have a daughter. I remembered when each one of those sisters were 11. And I thought if we could get these kids out before they're ever hurt the first time, that would be a miracle. And something he said made me realize that he had more. I said, Fuego, I said, you have more. He called them 0 kilometer miles, right? I said, you have more 0 kilometer miles? He goes, oh yeah, I got 3 or 4 more. I said, you're bringing those to my party. And see, what the plan was I told him, listen, I will fund your resort under one condition. We're going to have a party. You're going to bring all of the kids that you have right now to this party. If me and my guys are happy with your inventory, then I'll fund your project. This was the sting was so that we could get all the kids to the same place so that we could rescue them all on the same day, right? And so I said, you're bringing those other ones to my party too, those 0 kilometer miles. He goes, oh no. He says, they're too expensive. I said, too expensive? I'm already paying this guy $25,000, paying him $500 per child just for a minimum of 50 kids just for 2 hours in the afternoon with them, right? And this is dark shit. This is people think, oh, this is dark. I'm going to a party doing cocaine. These are kids, right? This is how dark humanity gets when we don't fix our shit. This is the reality. And so he's like, oh no, they're too expensive. He said, I already paid him 25 grand. He says, Jefe, he says, if you want to fuck those other virgins, it's going to cost you maybe 2,000 for that one. It's going to maybe 5,000 for the little one. It's going to cost you maybe 10,000 more. Now at this point, I'm legitimately pissed. No acting involved. No undercover. I'm fucking want to shoot him in the head, right? And I put my hands on my chest and I'm like, you don't think I can afford an extra $10,000? This is eagle me coming through. I've got a nice watch. I've got $2,000 cufflinks on. I've got. I'm playing this part of this wealthy playboy, right? And I said, you don't think I can afford an extra $10,000? He's like, oh no, Jefe, no. I said, I want every one of those virgins at my party. I said, they damn well better be virgins when they get there. They're not for you. They're for me. You understand? He goes, oh yeah, Jefe, I understand. This stupid smile. 2 weeks later, we go back down. We meet with the U.S. Embassy, the Colombian federal agents. They provided like 40 agents for us. 4 of them were our waiters. 4 of them were our maids. 4 of them were our cooks. They're not very good cooks, but they're armed. God. And 25 are there to storm the party. And these guys showed up with 54 kids. We had 3 separate cities going on at the same time. Total of over 120 children that day were rescued. And I'm sitting there at this table with these guys and negotiating this. And we put all the kids in the house area because we're waiting for the federal agents to rush in. And there was a delay. We do the signal of ordering tequila. Boom, the federal agent's supposed to come in. They didn't come. We're sitting there with traffickers. Later we found out that it was a major issue on their end, but it was almost a 45-minute delay. In that delay, after we ordered the tequila, then one of the traffickers gets up, he goes, okay, time for the party to start. He gets his cocaine out. He's putting the cocaine. Other traffickers go in, bring the kids out. I'm like, shit, we can't. Where's the agents, right? And I talk about that in the Sound of Freedom book that's coming out, all the details of the emotion and going through all of that. So and they bring out these 4 0-kilometer miles. There was an 11-year-old boy from Haiti. They gave him cocaine that morning because he was so scared it was going to hurt, right? There was this little girl, the same one he showed me on the picture on his phone, stands her in front of me. She's got long red braids. Her makeup is all smeared because she had been crying. She has a little kitty cat face on her shirt, a little pink kitty cat. And I'm sitting on a chair and she's standing up and she's eye level. This was one of the hardest moments of my life. This is what changed everything. All I could see was fear. And I made a commitment to myself, to God, to that child, that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth. I couldn't imagine anything worse. What would get humanity to the point where they thought that was attractive? It was all addictions. I'm telling you this right now. I found out over years, now almost every guy listening to us right now has looked at pornography. Just because you see pornography doesn't mean you're going to become a pedophile, right? But there's a big difference between sitting and visiting with your girlfriend and coming up with some whatever. And for some guys, it operates like a hardcore drug, just like cocaine, just like Oxycontin. You need something harder to have that same fix for some of these guys. And harder for some of them is a little bit more grotesque or, BDSM or rape videos or animal whatever. For some of them, harder is a little bit younger. And pretty soon they're fantasizing about things they wouldn't have even thought was attractive 5 years ago. This is where this tsunami of demand is coming from. This is why everybody needs to look in there. And guys are like, no, mine's not progressing. Oh, bullshit. I'll bet it started out years ago looking at the swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated, right? When we were teenagers, right? And then it went to the Victoria's Secret models and the lingerie, and then it went to some booby pictures, and then it went to full nudes, and then it went to some videos, and then it is progressing. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's insatiable because it's not divine fulfilling like a healthy relationship. And when you have something that is addictive like that, you have to take a look at where it's coming from, what void you're trying to fill, and you've got to get off of that track before it continues to the point where you're hurting another human being. And that's where this came from. And I remember the most beautiful moment of my life on that operation is after the agents came and stormed the party and arrested everybody, and the Child Protective Services people came in with the kids. And they started laughing, they started singing with the kids. And that sound of freedom, was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard. I started crying. I turned to my operators with me. I said, bro, I've spent my whole life making money, making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. I want to help. What can I do? And he said, Paul, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to, wear a $50,000 watch and negotiate a deal. He says, and a lot of these traffickers, that's what they look for. He says a lot of the guys who are addicted to stuff like this, they've already done everything and they're filled with ego and pride and money. They walk and talk and act like you. He said, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. So that was the beginning. And I knew we couldn't take millions of people to see what we had seen, but we could help millions of people feel what we had felt. So I was the primary investor and executive producer in a movie called The Sound of Freedom. And I'm the author of the book by the same name coming out later this month that not only talks about the missions, but more importantly, gives parents tools they need to situational awareness and things they can do to keep their kids safe. And it talks about the root of the problem and what we need to do to liberate humanity from the toxicity that is creating things like child abuse and trafficking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
What are your thoughts on potential clients that were going to go to that club and get a membership, and even the traffickers? If you're comparing it to the disease of it is the disease of addiction, right? It progressively gets worse over time. Now, I don't even know if I could say this on air, but I'm not going to say the word, but a man going for young kids, that a lot of people say, shoot them, right? Remove them from the earth. Most people would say with someone who's addicted to heroin, get them help, recover. What are your thoughts on the potential clients? And yeah.
Well, in the beginning, I remember I would tell my operators, listen, it's not our place to judge. That's God's job. But if we need to arrange that meeting with God a little bit early, that's okay. Because these guys are wasting my oxygen. You rape a child, you need to not see the light of day again. That's you're done. You're done. However, after 10 years of doing this work, I looked at the numbers and I realized there was more children being sold today than there was 10 years ago. And I said to myself, Paul, if your goal in your life is to eradicate child trafficking, you're not doing a very good job. Because every time we pulled 20 kids out of hell, if not enough was being done to fix the demand, then 20 more children were being sucked back into the most unimaginable situations you can ever. And so I said, okay, I found myself wishing I had a time machine. I could go back 5 or 10 years and pull these kids out before they were ever hurt in the first place. But that, of course, would just leave a void. And I thought, okay, if I had that time machine, what would I do? I would actually sit down with the perpetrator. I would go back before they ever cross that line, before they're wasting my oxygen, right? And I would sit down with the perpetrator and the trafficker, and I would say, what is going on in your life that makes you think that in any way it's okay to walk down that road? And I realized that the majority of the traffickers were trafficked to themselves as children. The majority of the perpetrators were abused themselves in physical, verbal, or even sexual abuse as a child. And many of them, that abuse, that unhealed trauma, created a situation where they dealt with low self-esteem and anger issues and anxiety and depression. And almost every one of them were addicted to something. And those addictions led to other addictions and other addictions. And pretty soon they were trying to fill an insatiable hole that couldn't ever be filled in the road that they were on. And now, I tell people, what I'm going to say next, don't get me wrong. I am not a sympathizer of anyone who hurts a child. I've literally put my life in danger hundreds of times to ensure that innocence isn't ever hurt again from these guys. But I realized after all these years that if I'm ever judging another human being, whether it's for cutting me off on the freeway, whether it's for being a heroin addict, whether it's for selling me a child, if I'm ever judging another human being, it's not even a 99%, it's a 100% chance that I don't have all the facts. I don't know. There's only one person in the universe that has all the facts, and that ain't me. I don't know. I don't know if that guy cutting me off on the freeway, I don't know if his wife's in the hospital I don't know if he was just taught to drive that way by a fucked up dad. I don't know. He might just be an asshole. But I can't judge. I don't know all the facts. I don't know if that heroin addict could have been abused as a child himself. He could have had, 5 girlfriends that just completely crushed him. He might have had parents and grandparents that were addicts as well. There's so many things that I don't know that it's impossible for me to judge. And that guy selling me a child was likely abused himself, was likely hurt himself in a horrible way. And it led to 1,000 bad things that happened to him and 1,000 bad decisions. Now, it's super important. That does not justify their behavior. It doesn't justify the guy cutting me off on the freeway. He should be pulled over and he should get a ticket so that he can stop putting my life in danger by cutting me off like that. That heroin addict should get the help and the love that he needs to get through that. That person who's abusing a child needs to go behind bars so he can never hurt a child again. But you can do so from a place of compassion. You can do so from a place of understanding that we all have unresolved issues in our past. That if we, and everything can be healed. Everything that in our past, everything that we have done and everything that has been done to us can all be washed away, can all be healed. It's all going to require the help of God to do so. And yeah, I'm going to go there. I am not religious at all, but I do every single day acknowledge the power of my Creator. In fact, in the Alcoholics Anonymous program, 4 or 5 of those 12 steps have God involved. You've got to acknowledge that we are powerless on our own. We have to turn to our divine Creator for that extra help. It's the same thing with Sexual Addicts Anonymous. That's a vital part of the tools that you need to recover and wash away those things, whether they were done to us or things that we have done to hurt other people.
So we talked about part of healing from anything is helping another person, helping someone else, giving back. I go to that 12-step program. The 12th step is helping a newcomer.
Yeah.
Giving away what you have so that you can keep it. We talked about the service work that you do, the giving back that you do. Let's rewind a little bit. What brought you to a place where you moved away from, let's say, corporate America and, making money and that being kind of your higher power? Where were you, let's say 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and what brought you to the place where you got into helping others?
Well, 12 years ago, I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I was Paul. You have to bleep this part
No,
out.
you can say it.
I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I was Paul fucking Hutchinson, right? I had built a multi-billion-dollar company. I had thousands of employees. I had a house that my ego was so out of control that it wouldn't fit in a stadium. I had a house with 10 bathrooms, 8 private suites, 7 fireplaces, 3 kitchens. I had a basketball court in my basement. I built a stage on my edge of part of my basketball court. I put a DJ booth with massive speakers, like huge TVs, and 2 stripper poles on my stage.
Oh my God.
I mean, we're talking, I would have parties every other weekend with 150 of the most beautiful girls I could possibly find. I would get phone calls from NBA players saying, "What's up, Paul?" I can't tell you their names, but you can figure it out from where I live. "What's up, Paul? Hey, wonder if we can have a party at your house over the 4th of July and you can bring as many girls as you can get," right? So I've got 20 NBA players, 150 girls, and me and my buddy. What? All right. So I was living a life that most guys are like, wow, that would be awesome, right? This is where I was at when I got that phone call from the Attorney General. Now, the reality is I was that image of arrogance and greed and lust. I wasn't doing anything illegal. I would put my life in danger for children. But, that lust energy was something that the traffickers were accustomed to. And so that's what worked well in the beginning as I was starting to do the undercover work. I would go in as, Paul, my personal assistant. I told her, listen, take down everything online about the real me. I want to do this undercover stuff. I want to help. I said, and I already had pictures of me with Lambos and Ferraris and private jets and, all this stuff. And so I said, I want to be, there's like 1 million Pauls out there. So do a new profile for Paul Johnson. She's sitting here typing, she can type faster than I can think, right? And she stops and she looks up at me and she said, you have a chance to redefine yourself and you're going to be Paul Johnson. She said, how about Paul Stone, right? So she does this whole profile for Paul Stone, right? And it worked. It worked well. These traffickers see pictures of this Paul Stone with this nice lifestyle and stuff, and the undercover operators are connecting with, hey, this is the guy paying for the movie, and boom, they would pull out, and we would go city after city after city after city around the world and save kids. Now, here's the problem. It was feeding into my own problem. Yes, we were helping kids, but now I had the best panty dropper story on the planet, right? Now you go to these parties, not only am I got this big company, I fly my helicopter.
Saving all these kids.
Yeah, I'm a kung fu master Batman. You want to fuck? That's really where it was. So it was feeding into this negative energy, and we were blowing through undercover operators. I had Green Berets at 300 missions in Afghanistan and Middle East. Already had PTSD, already had Xanax and Prozac just dealing with their anxiety, depression from their life, right? And one undercover mission with me and seeing a menu with children, they were done. They're like, I can't. So we couldn't keep our operators in. And so I got a phone call from two of my, so I was trying to figure out, how do we do with this? Do I bring back in the company that I built 35 years ago, helping them with their anxiety? And, we're starting putting together some programs and stuff. And I get a phone call from two of my operators, Andy and Jimmy. Andy had done 22 missions with me. Jimmy had done 13. And on a call together, they said, Paul, do you trust us? And I said, yeah, I trust you with my life. We go undercover. I'm in charge of talking. You're in charge of making sure I don't die. They said, you need to come to this healing retreat with us. I'm like, I don't need to heal. I'm Paul fucking Hutchinson. Everybody wants to be me. They're like, no, you're in your second marriage, headed for a divorce. Your kids don't talk to you. Yeah. They said, you think that you're going to be happy with your next helicopter, with your next car, with your next girl. And they said, this is going to be the most transformational experience you've ever had. And I'm like, you know what? I've done transformational stuff. I've literally walked across coals with Tony Robbins standing next to me. I've done, you can't tell me this is going to be the most transformational experience of my life. They said, trust me, it will be the most transformational experience of your life. And I'm telling you, Kevin, this experience changed everything for me. Even more than seeing the kids being sold. Yes, that I made a commitment, I wanted, but it was just feeding this energy of ego me and feeding in more money and doing undercover and helping the kids. But for me personally, none of that made even a dent compared to this transformational retreat. Now, what I'm going to say next, a lot of guys are going to be like, oh, well, yeah, I didn't expect that, but I'm just going to go there. They had a doctor who had been working for years on the proper use of psychedelics when it came to addiction recovery, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and breaking through childhood trauma. Now, when I was told that that's what she was using, I'm thinking, wait a minute. Those are Schedule I drugs. Those are as dangerous as cocaine, right? I encourage the listeners to look it up. With the Johns Hopkins University studies, psilocybin in mushrooms is safer than table sugar. There's never been a case of addiction, not one in history. There's never been a case of overdose, not one, ever. And when used properly with a trained therapist, with a trained facilitator, there is nothing that I have seen that is more effective at overcoming anxiety, depression, PTSD, even addictions and childhood trauma. And so that some of the reason we haven't heard about it is because for the last 50 plus years, they've been Schedule I drugs and nobody has done any research. The new research within the last 12 months since I've been talking very adamantly about this has been off the charts. In fact, I've been friends with RFK for about 10 years. And whatever your political views are, one thing I really like about him is he's coming in and he's trying to take down big pharma and big food and all this stuff. One of the things that he is committed to is to decriminalize the use of psychedelics when it comes to trauma therapy, addiction therapy, anxiety, depression, etc. Now, let me explain it. First of all, I'll explain my personal experience and I'll explain why. So I went into this retreat and I'm like, okay, whatever, cool. And the facilitator said, okay, what do you want to work on? And I said, well, I need to see if I want to stay married or not, because, my wife's effing, NBA players. Well, of course. Look at me. What was I doing? It was like pot calling the kettle black, right?
What city were you living in, by
We're
the way?
living in Utah.
Okay. Jazz.
And it was the Utah Jazz.
Uh-huh.
We had all kinds of
Karl Malone.
We had Royce O'Neal at our house all the time. We had Rudy Gobert at our house all the time. I had Donovan Mitchell at our house all the time. It was super fun.
Yeah.
So and a lot of those guys were good guys.
Yeah, of course.
But some of them we had some fun. So
Mm-hmm.
we were doing body shots on my pool table with some of them at one point.
So this experience, let's talk about it.
So this was the most beautiful, horrific experience of my life. Horrific because the facilitator, in using the certain strains that she was using, there's 180 different strains. She used one very specifically for taking me to hell and very specific music for taking me to hell. And I felt, Kevin, in every cell of my body, I felt the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom. As if I was them, it was pure empathy like you can't imagine. I probably felt worse than even they felt. I felt like Satan himself had his foot on my chest and I was 600 miles in the dirt and he was pressing down on me and I could feel all this pain. And then the facilitator changed the music and boom, I had this beautiful, almost like God was lifting me out of the pit of hell and I could feel all this shit coming off of me and I could feel the joy of the kids that we had helped to rescue when they were returned with their parents, as if I was them. And then the music back, and then boom, I went back to hell again. And I felt the pain of the families that had broken up because some guy came to my party and slept with a cheerleader and his wife left him. And the ripple effect of my words, my actions in everything that I did, everything that I said, and the impact that it was having on everyone around me and humanity. I actually felt this ripple that not only went from, okay, I broke apart this family, now this daughter, because now her parents were broken up because he came to my party and now she got knocked up in high school and now she lost the baby and then the husband ends up committing suicide and this was every single thing that was affected because of my actions. I could see it, I could feel it, and I wanted to die. It was so hard. And then boom, she changed the music and it came back and I could breathe again.
Oh my God.
It was transformational in every way. And then she pulls me into another room and we're sitting there and I'll say it on air. We actually were at my house at the time. We run these in Latin America right now because we haven't got the laws changed in the US yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I was there. I'm on this neuroplasticity state. Now, this is important to understand for guys, and then I'll go into this story in my living room. When we're kids, when we're like 0 to 9, 10 years old, our brain is in a state of neuroplasticity. We're very, very impressionable. We can learn 3 or 4 languages at the same time when we're 3 and 4 years old. 95% of our life is run by our subconscious mind. And a huge percentage of that subconscious mind is created in that neuroplasticity state when we're 0 to 9 years old. After that period of time, in order to get something into our subconscious, it takes about 21 days to create a new habit. Sometimes even longer if we've got addictions, to trying to break free of whatever is those traumas that we're holding on to, whatever those addictions are coming from. Sometimes it even takes longer than 21 days. But that neuroplasticity is the key. And if something happens when you're 7 or 8 years old, 6, 3 or 4 years old, and it gets imprinted, it gets ingrained, it gets buried in your subconscious mind. Let's say that, some traumatic event happened with your uncle touching you, whatever. Or even if it was something just like your dad saying, hey, you look fat in that outfit. You literally, your entire life, that is going to be dictating a lot of your decisions. And it comes out in anger issues. It comes out in, thinking that we're always fat and overdoing it. And all of these addictions, all of these things come from things that are hidden in our subconscious mind. And so imagine this concrete, then it freezes after about 9 years old. And in order to change anything, that 21 days, it takes a jackhammer and you're trying to smooth out these big bumps and these things that you're trying to roll over all the time. Well, what if you could take that concrete and turn it back to a state of neuroplasticity, back to a state of just flow so that you could smooth it out in the right way? That's what psilocybin does, is it creates that neuroplasticity. This is why it's incredibly dangerous to go do mushrooms with your friends at a rave party. Because if you're back in this state of neuroplasticity, your subconscious mind is super impressionable. And if there's a orgy going on over here and a rap music going on over here and somebody drinking over here, literally those things get imprinted into our subconscious mind in an unhealthy environment. However, if you have a trained facilitator who knows how to work with that neuroplasticity for that 6 or 7 hour trip, that experience on the psilocybin, knows the right music to be playing, knows how to work through it, you can literally do 10 and 20 years worth of therapy in 3 or 4 days. Incredibly powerful. And so for me, one of my asks when I went into was not only figuring out, whether I want to stay married or not, but my friends already told the facilitator, yeah, he's pretty fucked up. He's like screwing everybody's lives, right? And one of the things is I left the church of my youth about 15 years before.
What kind of church was it?
I was Mormon.
Okay.
We were super restrictive, no coffee, no tea, no alcohol, none of those things. And I left it. And in doing so, I completely separated from God, right? And one of the things that the facilitator knew that I even said going into it, I says, I really like to, try to get back on a healthy relationship there somehow. Well, so after this experience of going to hell and back and feeling all this emotion, then we're sitting there in the living room and I pointed the Greek gods. I have Poseidon. I have these big, beautiful sculptures, bronze sculptures. I've got Poseidon and Zeus, and I've got Atlas in the middle holding the world on his shoulders, right? And I said to the facilitator, I said, I feel a lot like Atlas. I'm still in my ego space, right? I said, I feel like Atlas. I got 4,000 employees, but I got the world on my shoulders. I'm in charge of holding the world type thing, right? But look how strong God made me. The stomach of my Greek god was all just chiseled, right? I says, God made me so strong so I can handle that. She kind of laughs at my ego self a little bit. And she goes, Paul, she said, I honor the fact that you're seeing some qualities in those statues. She said, but you know as well as I do that those were mythological gods. She said, what about your relationship with him? And she points at this statue of Jesus that I had. And here I'm in this neuroplasticity state, super honest and open. And I'm like, oh, I don't qualify for a relationship with him. And she said, well, why not? I said, well, I'm sure he doesn't approve of all the girls I've been with, doesn't approve of the things I'm doing. And when I left the church of my youth years ago, I was told by my bishop that until I was rebaptized into that church, that I wouldn't have the Spirit of God with me. And she said, do you really think that that's true? And I'm like, well, no, I try to help people. I try to do good. She said, why don't you work on that relationship? So here I'm high as fuck. I could barely walk. I'm on like 5-6 grams, right? I mean, full ceremonial dose stuff. You have to have help to go to the bathroom type thing, right? So I stand up off this beanbag and she helps me grab the statue. And I sit down on the beanbag with that statue of Yeshua, Christ. For the next 2 hours, had this beautiful connecting conversation. And I now have a closer relationship with my Creator than I've ever had my entire life. And that experience changed everything for me in how the friends that I chose to be around, how I showed up. I started doing a lot of research on it, became a master facilitator. My daughter became a shaman, and we specialize in helping people with addictions, break free of childhood trauma, feelings of being unloved, all of the voids that they were trying to fill. And we have an 85% success rate in helping people with alcohol addictions break free completely with only one single experience with us. This isn't something where you keep holding on to and have to keep coming down every single month. We have other facilitators that use things like ayahuasca. And ayahuasca, they have over an 80% success rate in helping people with cocaine and heroin addictions. Now, they have to stay down there for a couple weeks. And ayahuasca is a pretty crazy experience, but it's not addictive at all. 0 cases of addiction. In fact, just the opposite. If with 3 or 4 times with ayahuasca there to try to break free of these addictions, your body has no interest whatsoever in going back because you're throwing up for 6 hours straight. But it breaks those bonds. And what happens in that experience is your mind will loop on whatever it is you want to release. Let's say it's a pornography addiction. You're looping on the people and that you've heard and all of this stuff. And Mama Ayahuasca says, are you ready to release? Are you ready to release? Yeah, we're going to release it right now. And boom, you literally throw up from the bottom of your toes and get rid of it. And that physical process of releasing physically together with that emotional release solidifies that in your subconscious mind so that you don't have the desire to go back.
Let me ask you a question. Sure. So I did a little research with psychedelics. Now it says with drug addiction, there's not enough data to say what percentage. I looked at 1 year clean and sober. So from when they do it till a year. For drinking, it said 30%.
30?
30. Stay sober for abstinent, they said, for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
With drugs with drugs specifically, there wasn't enough data.
There's not enough data because it's been illegal to even test in the United States for the last 55 years, right? And so my data is coming from the people who have come through our retreat in Colombia. And that I would bet, I put a lot of money on this bet that 5 years from now, because we now have Johns Hopkins University and a lot of others that are doing the studies, I'll bet you that 5 years from now, the data is going to be substantial. That drug addictions, alcohol addictions, because I've seen it with pornography addictions and stuff on a really powerful scale, because that's what we were working with sexual addictions when it came to dealing with child trafficking, et cetera, right? And so, and here's the thing, that a lot of those are based on one single dose, right? You go in, you do a 3 or 6 gram, and in a clinical environment, it really doesn't work. I'm just going to tell you right now, we have tested every single way of doing it. And just taking mushrooms doesn't fix anything. It doesn't. It puts you in a state of neuroplasticity. Okay, now it's really between you and you to try to fix things right there, right? And that's only if you come into it with the right intentions. So having the right music is actually really, really important. You can, Johns Hopkins University has a bunch of frequency music that are specifically designed for the healing retreats. And there has to be more and more research done on it. All I'm saying is that you have the opportunity to take that hard and concrete that's super bumpy throughout your life, turn it back into that liquid state so you can smooth it out the right way. You have the opportunity to smooth it however you want to. But if you don't, just taking the mushrooms isn't going to fix anything. But if you come in with a really clear intention of what you want to create, and we do a combination of things called combo and bufo together with the psilocybin, and there's 180 different strands of psilocybin, and knowing which ones to use to break free. And then once you've broken free of these problems, these addictions, these traumas, et cetera, then you have to fill it in with that highest and best version of you. We use an entirely different strain to be able to step into that 4.0 version of you. And so it's a process that it's not going to fix by itself. You have to come in wanting to change. And then you have to have a facilitator who knows how to kind of work with that neuroplasticity in that state. But I think, and it's important that people understand the basics of what we're talking about here, because the laws will change over the next couple of years in the United States. And already states are having it decriminalized. And it's super important that you're like, oh, it's decriminalized. I'm going to go do mushrooms with my buddy at his party. And no, that's not what it's about. Find somebody who knows what they're doing, and you can create that window of opportunity. You can create miraculous changes.
What would you say to the listener who's saying, well, okay, he said 85, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said 85% success rate healing from heroin?
Yeah, these are down in Peru, and you can look these up, heroin and cocaine addictions.
Okay.
And we don't do the heroin and cocaine. There's some doctors in Peru. You go down there for between 2 and 4 weeks, and they'll do like one ayahuasca and then 2 days off and then 2 days on of ayahuasca and then 1 day off, and they'll do integration in between.
Got it.
But those are the ones that are reporting 85% success rate in breaking free with no relapses.
After how long?
After this, their studies are a year out because they've only been running for about the last year.
Okay. And what would you say to the people that are like, well, it's not in the US, it's in Peru. They could just be fudging those numbers and making them up.
They could say that if they want to.
Yeah.
We'll just have to wait 5 years until they approve these things in the US, and then we can see what they can be done here. So all I know, the stuff that I know for sure is the people who have come out of our program. Now, we started out with operators, guys who had PTSD already from being, a Navy SEAL, Green Beret, et cetera. Moving forward, we started working with women who were severely abused in their childhood, sold by their mom, by their uncle, their grandpa, all of this heavy stuff, and 10 and 20 years worth of therapy weren't helping. And so that's where we brought them in. And then moving forward, now we work exclusively with what I call the tip of the iceberg, or the tip of not the tip of the iceberg, the tip of the umbrella. These are influencers, the ones that I personally am a part of. We'll bring in family offices, leaders of countries and whatnot. And we have those because I used to manage money for a lot of them in the past. And so we'll bring them in for the transformational experiences, because I realize, if we can get the influencers to learn how to lead from a place of the heart, to not be coming from that place of ego and pride and arrogance and lust and greed, et cetera, we can change the world.
Oh, it's all over social media, and we see snippets of people's lives and how they portray it through influence online, Instagram, TikTok, et cetera. And I mean, I know for a fact, if I wake up in the morning and I start looking at Instagram, it fucks my day up. Now I'm spiritually, I am bankrupt for the day. And I'm comparing myself to every single person throughout the day. Why don't I have that yet? Paul just talked about he was 42 years old and he had this huge house with 10 like, why aren't I close to that? You know, and it's not a good place to be mentally.
It's not. Well, and as you heard here, I wasn't happy at all. I would have traded places with you in a heartbeat because I was miserable. You know, you've got a relationship with your daughter. It's beautiful. It's everything to you. My kids wouldn't even talk to me. I had no conversations with my kids for a number of years because of the life I was living.
Take us through your book. What is it called? Where can people find it? And what is it about?
It's called The Sound of Freedom. It's the true stories that inspired the film. But even beyond that, you know, the film just talks about the child rescue mission we did in Colombia. We actually took 8 different rescue missions and put them together into one storyline with the film. But a lot of times people will leave the movie and they'll be like, okay, I want to do something. I want to go help rescue kids. So yeah, the worst thing you can do is go to Mexico and try to go undercover, right? You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot. The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children. And we talk about this in the book. Well, people are like, well, why hugging my children? How is that going to help? Well, the majority of children that get trafficked aren't getting taken from a healthy home, put into a container ship and taken to another country. Yes, that happens. But the majority of children who are being abused, the majority of children, even the ones who are being sold financially for these acts, sleep in their own beds at night and their parents don't even know that it's happening. You need a relationship with your children where they can very easily come to you and say, hey, Dad, I don't like it when you tell me to hug Uncle Harry because he touches me weird. And now he's telling we should have secrets that are outside of you. Or I don't like this babysitter because she's showing us pornography and says that we should trust her more than we should trust you. Or I don't like this friend's house because her brother's taking pictures of us when we're changing. And now he's going to send them around the school if I don't do other things. Or your 12-year-old comes to you and says, hey, Dad, you need me to be your 12-year-old's 911. When they fuck up, it needs to be you. It needs to not be you that they're afraid of calling. It needs to be you that they call first, right? When your 12-year-old is online chatting and she thinks that it's another 12-year-old boy and he sends some pictures, illicit pictures of himself and encourages her to do the same. And then she does so. And then he sends back and says, send me a video or else I'm going to send these around the school. And then she's scared. And so she sends a video. And that's not a 13-year-old boy on the other end. It's a 45-year-old man. Ugh. And it happens all the time. It's called sextortion. And so many kids are being put in these positions. Here's what's crazy. Your 12-year-old doesn't even have to send a nudie picture. There's nudify apps out there that these predators have that can take the social media of your child if you've got it open and you don't have it blocked so that it's only her friends. And we talk about the things you can do to keep your kids safe in the Sound of Freedom book. And so he could literally take her picture, create a fake nude of her and use that as extortion to get her to do other things. And so that it is incredibly important to not only that, but what I talk about in the Sound of Freedom book, I talk about situational awareness. I talk about hand-to-hand combat skills. I have the whole first section, we call it Making of an Undercover Operator, where I go through all of the things that kept me and my team safe, the things that we were watching for, how we identified the traffickers, et cetera, so that you as a parent can be aware of all of these things yourself. And then the second and third sections of it are all about the rescue we did in Colombia, the rescues we did in Haiti, and all of these others. Moving forward, the last section is all about liberating humanity. It's all about what we've been talking about for the last half hour. It's about where are these traumas coming from? Why do we even have something like child abuse or child trafficking or human trafficking in any way? And what do we need to do as humanity to break free of this toxicity so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we don't have to have these conversations anymore. That our rising generation isn't dealing with the same kind of unhealed trauma that we dealt with, so that we can truly live in a world of peace and truly live in a place where we don't have to worry about how this unhealed trauma is affecting the lives of others.
Paul, I want to thank you. This was beautiful. I really appreciate you coming out. I appreciate the work that you do to make our world a better place and a safer place for our kids. I have a 6-year-old. I could not imagine. So I want to thank you for not only the work that you do, but for coming here and sharing and spreading a message of hope.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm super grateful for you, for you building up an audience and then you trusting me with the audience. Do you know that back at the time of Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't guys like me that made the difference. It was guys like you. It wasn't the guys rescuing the slaves. It was the influencers. It was people like Harriet Beecher Stowe. She wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was the podcast of the age, right? And she had real people that were reading her book. In fact, it created an awareness where good people everywhere realized what was happening in the South. In fact, years later, when Abraham Lincoln met her, he said, "So you're the little lady that wrote the book that started the Great War." So today, it's you being willing to have people like me on your podcast that is creating an awareness with good people everywhere, so that we can do things to keep our kids safe, so that we can do things to change ourselves, so that we can look in the mirror and say, okay, how am I showing up? How am I showing up for myself, for my family, for my community? And what are the ripple effects of my actions? And how are they affecting not only my family, but other people's families and even their children? And that's something that all of us have to do. So thank you. Thank you for building a community. And, if people want to get more information on the book, they can go to Liberating Humanity, liberatinghumanity.com. All over social media is Liberating Humanity on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, et cetera. It's not about Paul Hutchinson. It's about you. It's about humanity. It's about what do we need to do to liberate humanity from their addictions, from their trauma, from all this toxicity that is holding us back from being the best versions of ourselves. So thank you for having me on your show.
Thanks for coming out.